Chapter 4. Who can find a virtuous woman? Proverbs 31. Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. Katy slept, and she dreamed. The September 1935 days were rain-free. They were autumn days, and they blessed Alan and Katy's move up to the Foxton Webb place. Alan and John had been able to haul up most of the household belongings: the Wilson heating stove, the small dresser, the cretonne-covered couch, the broken rocking chair, blind Grandma's pie safe, the Hoosier cabinet, Poppy's stand table, the library table, the linoleum, the heavy winter clothing, the quilts, Katy's canned fruit, and some of the pots, pans, dishes, and such. The moving was nearly complete. The house on the Gene Kuntz place had been stripped of most of its furnishings: the cook stove, the eating table, the cook table, the kitchen chairs, Kenneth Ray's high chair, the eating bench, and a bedstead were among the last of the household pieces to be moved. It was on a Friday. Katy'd spent the entire morning cooking. She'd boiled a pot of white beans, cooked some Irish potatoes, boiled eggs, fried some sausage and 2 chickens, baked extra biscuits, and whipped up some sorghum molasses cookies and 2 apple pies. She'd said as she put wood into the kitchen stove, "This'll be the last food I'll be cooking in this kitchen." And the cook stove cooled down. She cleaned out the ashes. She washed the 3-legged cast iron bean pot, the heavy skillet, the long bread pan, and the pie pans. The eating table was set for 6 people. Katy breathed a sigh of relief. The day's plans were going smoothly. "Geraldine, now come out from under that cook table. We need to get up the cows and get the milking done," she said softly. With the cream can and milk bucket, she followed Geraldine through the doorway and down the steps of the back porch. Seeing the boys out by the garden, she called out, "Kenneth Ray, Benny, stop digging in that dirt and come on down to the barn." It was milking time. The cows had to be milked. At the end of a day, if milking time ran over, some of the cows' udders would be swollen in a strut. Many times Katy'd seen them dripping milk even before she'd be ready with her milk stool and her milk bucket. On this particular evening in the barn, the children behaved especially well, staying part of the time in the box in the corner and climbing in and out of it the rest of the time. There was also that bale of hay behind Katy. It was a perfect height from which to jump, always in the opposite direction of Katy's milking stool. The children behaved as if they knew Mommy needed their help with the milking. Katy milked. The children played. Geraldine patted the old mother cat that lived in the barn. Kenneth Ray delighted in out-jumping Benny and yelled at the top of his lungs, "I won! I won!" Yes, it was a fun and peaceful milking time. The children and the cat, all of them had a place in the barn, and Katy was on her milking stool, just content with the children staying away from the hind legs of the cows. She was thankful, too, because the warm day allowed her to take them with her to the barn. On an extremely cold day, she would have had to leave them in the house. They would have gotten cold in that box in the corner. Her trips back and forth between the house and the barn, just to make certain the children were safe, would have been many. During such times, and in others too, Katy did a lot of calling on the Lord, and she was always in a big hurry. Finally, that last cow was milked. The evening sun was still up in the sky, and Katy was well pleased, knowing there was still some daylight left. Her day's work was unfinished. She thought about Alan and John. They'll be coming back from the Foxton Webb place with that empty wagon, and they'll eat a bite and take down the stovepipes and the cook stove. They'll load the wagon again. They'll have a few hours' work ahead of them, too. This is the 13th day in September 1935. Katie's steps were slow, not because the cream can was heavy. She'd been on her feet since early morning. She stopped at the cistern to pour the milk, the warm milk, into the long milk cooler. Having to manage without scalding water, she rinsed the cream can and the milk bucket with cold water and turned them upside down on a board by the cistern. "Maybe that won't kill us," she said, meaning that this wasn't a clean way to take care of the milking utensils. With the last drop of the day's milk poured into the long cooler, she hurried to finish the trickiest job at the cistern. That job was lowering the cooler into the cool water. After all of the years, 7 of them really, of living on the Gene Kuntz place, she'd learned the knack for handling the hard-to-dunk metal tank. Often she'd have to take a second try, or a third try, or as many as needed, and she'd tug and pull it to the top of the cistern before getting just the right amount of tension on the rope. This time she'd held that rope just right. Down that long cooler went without tipping. She heard the sound of the cooler meeting up with the cistern water. She felt the slack in the rope, and sure enough, the tank was floating. No, this time she didn't lose 1 teaspoon of milk. "Well, let's go, children," she said, and led the way to the back door. Running past her, Kenneth Ray and Benny each held Geraldine's hands, pulling her along playfully. They'd hold up their arms, trying to lift her up in the air. They'd swing her forward. They'd slow down, and she'd catch up with them. All 3 of them fell down on the ground, laughing, and immediately they sprang to their feet. As Katie followed behind, she was amused. But then she said to herself, "This'll be the last time I'll be tagging along behind them, going back to this house with the milking all done. And this is the last time that these children will play down there in that barn." Katie paused long enough to catch her breath, taking the time to glance up the dirt road. She could easily see old Beck and Kate topping the hill. That pleased her. She knew then that Alan and John had made it up to the Foxton Webb place. Kenneth Ray saw them too, and began yelling, "Daddy and Uncle John are coming down the road. You children, you can play outside for a while. Your Daddy and Uncle John will be here in just a little bit, and we'll have a bite to eat. You play out there by the garden. Geraldine, here are some lids. You can make mud pies. Boys, watch out for her, and I'll get something on the table." Moving quickly, Katie washed her hands. She was setting the last of the supper's food on the table as the men walked through the doorway. Katie knew they didn't want to waste any time. She'd already had poured fresh water into the washpan for them, and hanging on the nail was a clean hand towel. "The sun's still up a little bit," Alan was saying as he sat down at the eating table. "John," Katie said, "you just sit down and make yourself at home." With his elbows on the table, Alan glanced down at his empty plate modestly. For a brief second he was quiet, and then he looked over at his brother and said, "Well, now, John, you see the prospects." The children were still outside. From the back door, Katie could see Kenneth Ray and Benny digging in the dirt with their spoons. Geraldine was making bud pies. Katie stepped outside and called, "Children, it's supper time." She waited for them to start walking toward the back door. Thinking they'd not been able to hear her, she called louder, "Kenneth Ray, Benny, Geraldine, come on to the house now. It's supper time." Katy was back in her kitchen when the children wandered in from their last minute's playing. Geraldine's face and hands were mud-covered. After a good cleaning up and hand-washing, she was sitting in the high chair, and the boys were on the eating bench. Alan and John were both on their second cups of coffee before Katy sat down to have a bite with them. Then she was on her feet again, refilling the men's glasses with water and milk, and pouring more coffee into their cups. "Well, John, how's Deli?" she asked. "Oh, she's just fine, Katy." "Yeah, she's just fine. She's been trying to make some apple jelly and can up a few more quarts of apples, and I'd say she's all done with the milking by this time. Our cows are holding up tobble well lately. Yeah, I'd just say Deli's just about got all the milking done by this time. You and Deli'll have to come up to see us and have a Sunday dinner with us one of these Sundays. And John, I'm really glad you've been able to help us out with this moving." Hurriedly, Alan and John ate, talking about what they had to do. Right after they swallowed their last bites, Katy took care of the children, coaxing them to eat and clean their plates. She was reminding them of the big move to the Foxtan Webb place and trying to plan ahead and figure out how she'd be able to get all of her work done. 3 kitchen chairs were scooted away from the eating table. The long bench no longer supported the boys. Alan and John took down the cook stove and carried it to the wagon. After banging with the hammer, they disassembled the boys' iron bedstead. Rails were carried out. The footboard and headboard were carried out. And then they carried out the eating table, and the chairs, and the high chair, and the bench, and the last of the pots and pans. The house was almost empty. Suddenly, Katy felt a wave of sadness and said, "Well, that's the last time we'll eat on that table in this house." Her voice returned to her with a hollow sound, reflecting the emptiness in the room. To Katy, the house looked much the same as it looked on the day when she and Alan had moved in the spring of 1928. But a few things seemed different. The floors were bare as they had been then, but on the once new pine wood there were a few noticeable scratches. In the front room, where the heating stove sat on its pad, a rectangular space was lighter in color. In the kitchen, the floor underneath the place where the table had sat looked new, and on the kitchen floor next to the flue, the cook stove's feet left 4 indentations on the pine wood, and around the eating table, the floor showed signs of the moving chair legs and footsteps, and around the cook table, Katy recognized the places where she'd stood and peeled potatoes, cut up chicken, rolled out dough, and Katy thought of the many times that she'd swept and mopped these floors. In the front room, the pink-flowered walls were left with nails upon which the pictures and the mirror and the coats had been hung. In the space behind the heating stove, well, there were the nails with sagging clotheslines still attached to them. The open flue was a gaping hole, blatantly ugly against the pink-flowered paper, and it was a reminder of its uselessness without its stovepipes and the Wilson heating stove. In the kitchen, Katy suddenly remembered how hard she'd worked with Mommy in getting that green and white checkered paper pattern to match. To her surprise, the wallpaper still looked fairly clean, except for a few grease splatters next to the stove, and 2, right around the flue, were long black streaks. Katy remembered that happened on a windy day, and Alan allowed it was because of a strong gust of wind blowing soot down the chimney. and that blue-flowered wallpaper in that bedroom looked as pretty as the day on which she'd managed to paste it to the wall. Actually, it'd been her best work in papering. Yes, she and Alan hadn't been married very long, and Alan'd be out in the fields during the daytime, and she'd had plenty of time to paper the bedroom. Every day after she planted and hoed in her garden that summer in 1928, she'd made the time to hang a few more strips of that blue wallpaper, and in between times she'd have to take care of her hens, and she'd rush back into that bedroom and hang up another strip, and she'd fix Alan's supper for him, and she'd get up the cows in the late afternoon, and when it'd come time to milk, she'd be down at the barn with him, with her stool and milk bucket, and the milking would be all done, and the hogs would be slopped, and Alan would come in to eat a bite. The sun would go down, and bedtime would roll around, and if she would have scooted the bedstead out into the middle of the floor on any given papering day, so she could stand on the wood box and do up a wall, Alan didn't mind. He'd just move that bedstead back to its place there in the corner, and the next day Katie'd begin again with that wallpapering on her mind. But one day Katie hit a wall. She ran out of border right there on that bedroom wall, and it was the wall that went right off into the front room. As long as she was in the front room, it wasn't noticeable, but once she started to come out of the bedroom, her eyes met that unfinished wall. She wondered what her Mommy Rosie May'd say about a problem like that. Sure enough, the next morning, Katie was back in that bedroom, looking at the wall with the missing border, and she was making up the bed and smoothing out the feather bed, and she'd studied about what Mommy'd do to remedy that situation. Katie'd look up at that one wall and at the ceiling. She smoothed out that feather bed a few more times, and she smoothed it out a few more times, and just like a bolt of lightning right out of the sky, Katie thought of the way to finish off that bedroom. So, after the breakfast dishwashing and the gathering of eggs and the tending to her setting hens and the sweeping of the kitchen floor and the drawing of water for the water bucket and the carrying in of the wood and the peeling of a few Irish potatoes for dinner, Katie was doing what she figured Mommy'd do. On the cook stove, Katie had a tea kettle of boiling water for making the wallpaper paste. Up on that wooden box she was, measuring the number of feet she'd need, and back in the kitchen she was, with that leftover piece of a roll of pink-flowered front room wallpaper laid out on the eating table, and with her ruler and scissors she was at work, making a border for that bedroom wall, and Katie was up on that wooden box, putting up the last piece of border when Alan came in for his dinner. That pink-flowered border on that blue-flowered wallpaper looked fine, and after Rosie May'd seen it, she told Katie an exact repeat of what she'd said about that green and white checkered wallpaper on the kitchen walls, that she'd not ever seen very many papering jobs where everything matched up all the way, and since Rosie May thought it looked good, that settled it. Now that was before Kenneth Ray'd been born, and after Kenneth Ray was born, that wallpaper border was the least of Katie's worries. She seldom had the time to even look up at it. Yes, she'd had more time back then, and yes, that bedroom with its blue walls and its one pink border pleased her, and it was plenty fine enough for Katie. "Well," she said, suddenly coming back to her senses and remembering Alan and John and the loaded wagon, I don't have time to stand around here all day long in this bedroom. I need to go out to that clothesline and take down those curtains and fold them up. I'd say they're dry by this time." She looked at the windows without curtains. She thought, "These windows could all use a good washing." "Well, I'll have windows to wash on the Foxtan Webb place. That'd make more sense. There's no use to wash these windows if nobody's living here. Maybe I can get some of these curtains here to fit somehow. Some of those windows up there. I bet I'll wind up having to make some new curtains for that front room. Those windows are long windows." I just wonder if this is how Albert felt when Lulie decided she wanted to leave the old home place and move over to the Carson place. That old home place was a good place and had a pretty fine house on it with screen doors and a long porch and a ladder going to the loft. They left that good barn and a good hen house and that good cistern of water. For one thing, it was good for Albert there on the Carson place. He got that fine blacksmith shop with a forge and a blower, and that blower's turned by a crank. That's what Alan says. And Albert's got an anvil, a big one, Alan says, and a vise and all kinds of blacksmith tools. Albert can make fine roof shingles in that shop of his. Every man needs a shop and some tools like that. Tools don't rot and fall down. Maybe Alan can have a place and get together some good tools up on the Foxtan Webb place. I guess we'll have to build a better barn up there sometime. Katie, hon, we're just about ready to get going," Alan said, stepping through the doorway into the kitchen. "Katie," he stopped long enough to drink a dipperful of water. Trying to act as if everything was normal, she walked into the kitchen and stood close to him. He could sense that she had something on her mind, but he didn't say anything to her. She was standing in the middle of the almost empty kitchen when he went out the back door, and soon Katie was walking only a few steps behind him. He looked for Kenneth Ray, Benny, and Geraldine, waiting for them to come to him. He bent down and rubbed them on the tops of their heads. They followed him to the rear of the wagon, watching as he studied for the last time the hind wheel on the wagon. He cautioned them, "You children oughtn't to be standing right here behind this wagon. That team could move, and that wagon would roll over on you. You stand over here." Quickly, he looked at the late evening sun in the west. He glanced up to the north in the direction of the Foxtan Webb place. He put the lantern in the wagon and climbed up on the seat. "John, we'd better be going. We've still got a half-day's work ahead of us." The sky was a darkened golden-red color, streaked with light rays from the sunset. Alan and John were on the wagon seat. Old Beck and Kate began pulling the wagon's cargo, going north up the hill, leaving the house at the end of the road. Dusk was settling in. The air was full of birds, circling, calling, making their last visits to the ground for food for the night. Katie was holding Geraldine in her arms. Kenneth Ray and Benny were standing close beside her. "Mommy, I want to go with Daddy," Kenneth Ray said. "No, not tonight, son. Tomorrow we'll all go up together to the new house. Your daddy won't be home until late tonight. It's getting late already. Even the chickens will be going to roost pretty soon, and this'll be the last time they'll roost in this hen house. Right now, we'd better shut up these hens. Your daddy'll want to catch them and put them in the chicken coops when he gets back home tonight. Some of these hens will be riding up in the wagon with us tomorrow when we go up to the Foxtan Webb place. Or maybe your daddy'll have to come and get them later. He's got a lot to think about." After fastening the door to the hen house, Katie began walking toward the kitchen door. thinking of all of the work she still had to do. She wouldn't complain, however. She remembered how tired Alan looked when he climbed into the wagon. She'd be happy when all of this moving was done. I'm worried about Alan, she thought. He's been working so hard. You children need to be cleaned up for bed. Come on in the house now. We'll have to wash up in cold water. Geraldine, let's clean you up first, son. I got to get this tub through that door. Kenneth Ray, son, hold that back door open for me. Be careful. Try not let it shut on Benny's fingers. Earlier in the day, Katie'd drawn up some water, rinsed out the No. 2 galvanized wash tub, and dumped a couple of buckets of water into the tub, hoping the hot sun would warm up the water. She figured it wouldn't be as cold as freshly drawn water when the children would step in for our cleaning up at bedtime. With some help from Kenneth Ray in holding the door open, she was able to move the tub through the kitchen door and into one corner of the living room. Under ordinary circumstances at bath time, Katie would have set the wash tub in the kitchen behind the cook stove. But on this night, there was no cook stove in the kitchen. She would have had a fire in the cook stove. There would have been a tea kettle full of hot water, and she would have poured hot water into the tub and cooled it down with cool water. But Katie had no fire in the cook stove and no steaming tea kettle. Only the cook table stood in the middle of the kitchen floor, loaded down with the leftovers of the day. The water bucket with its dipper, the coal oil lamp, the clock, and a few dishes, few pans, and clean dishcloths. And in the middle of the table was the basket, the bushel basket of food. On the floor were boxes packed with odds and ends, and empty fruit jars, ready for the next day's trip. You children, it's 6 o'clock already, and you've got to hurry up and get ready to go to bed here pretty soon. You boys will be sleeping on the floor tonight, too. The children gave no opposition to taking a bath, with Geraldine being first, Benny next, and Kenneth Ray being last. A bar of the yellow soap, a soft wash rag, and a few minutes of scrubbing left each one smelling clean and looking brand new again. The dirt of the day colored the water in the tub. Their hair was no longer sweaty. Their clean faces, arms, knees, elbows, legs, and feet told the story of a day's play with scratch marks, cuts, and bruises. Noticeably, little Geraldine had more than her share. And, hon, you'll have more tomorrow, Katie thought. Now you boys, stand over here close to this window where there's still a bit of light. I need to check you for something, she told them. This something meant brown ticks. And let me take a look at your ears. We could grow lettuce bed in your ears, Kenneth Ray. And look at my ears too, Mommy, Benny said, hoping for better news about his ears. Is Kenneth Ray growing lettuce in his ears? Katie chuckled. Kenneth Ray, bring me that little jug of coal oil, son. I'll doctor these chigger bites and these mosquito bites. Stand still, son. Let me put some of this salt paste on your chigger bites. Chiggers must really like you, son. And now, Benny, I need to see that wash rag again. Benny squirmed as that wash rag neared his ear. He winced. Oh, yes. He knew Mommy was a tough ear washer. And now, Geraldine, let me see that boil on your knee. Well, hon, it is trying to dry up, but let's just doctor it a bit. There. Katie was relieved after deciding the boil was better. Hon, I'll never forget that one bad boil you had on this same knee. Right there it was, she said, touching the scar. There, I see the scar that boil left. Yeah, hon, you were just trying to crawl around, and you'd crawl around on the linoleum. and you try to hold out your knee and crawl on your toes. This salve, it drew that one out, and it healed it up. Now you let me just put some coal oil, yes, some of this coal oil, on these bites here. 1, 2, hon, you're covered with bites. Benny, hand me that salt paste. There in that little bowl. Yawning, Kenneth Ray looked all around the room. He was tired from all of the day's play and the scrubbing and the salt paste and the coal oil doctoring. For the first time, he'd noticed his bed wasn't in its usual place. Mommy and Daddy, Mommy, Daddy and Uncle John moved our bed, and Kenneth Ray was upset because he wanted to go to bed right then. Where are we going to sleep? You boys will be sleeping on the feather bed, right there at the foot of our bed. You're getting tired, I know, son. I'm tired too, she thought. She picked up a feather bed and spread it out on the floor. Over it she spread a sheet and tucked it under. Bellies first, the boys fell, sploosh, down on the feather bed, almost before she had time to tuck the sheet under that fourth corner, and Geraldine was squirming her way into the space between them. Kenneth Ray and Benny pushed their heads under their pillows, giggling and enjoying their new bed. The floor was a cool place, and with all of the furniture gone, things looked different. The coal oil lamp wasn't on Poppy's library table. Instead, it was on the cook table, and Daddy wasn't at home. Yes, for the children, things were different, and they became quiet. They were waiting for Mommy to say the "Now I lay me down to sleep" prayer with them, and Katie was quiet because she was tired and waiting for Alan to come home. The four of them were in the bedroom. She sat down on the bare floor to rest, leaning against the hard wall next to the feather bed. Even the hardness of the floor and wall was comforting to her tired body. She was able to get off her feet for a short while, but within herself she forced the strength to say with the children, "Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. If I should die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take. Amen." And she thought about what the words meant. "Mommy," Benny asked, "when will Daddy be home?" "Don't you worry, hon, 'cause it won't be long." Geraldine said, "I want a drink of water, Mommy." Katie was on her feet again. As she filled the dipper, she thought, "This child'll be 2 years old tomorrow. 2 years old. Where's the time gone?" Yes, Kenneth Ray wanted a drink too, leaving nothing more than a drop or two in the bottom of the dipper. She refilled the dipper for Benny. Loudly he gulped as he swallowed the last of the water. Katie chuckled. "Benny, you must have not had a drink all day. All of you children were really thirsty. Somebody just might wet the bed tonight for sure. We'll ride in the wagon with you, Mommy, tomorrow." "We'll ride in the wagon with you and Daddy?" Kenneth Ray questioned. "Yes, son, tomorrow. Now you children, you just shut your eyes and go to sleep." The clock struck 7 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It was 7 o'clock. Time doesn't stand still, she thought. This is the last day that Geraldine will be able to hold up that one little finger. I'll have to work with her some and show her how to hold up one more finger. Right now, I'll put this dipper over here by the water bucket, and wouldn't you know it, this bucket is as dry as a bone. The house was quiet. The children were asleep. I could just rest here for a minute or two, Katie thought. She yawned. While sitting on the floor and leaning against the hard wall, she dozed. When she woke, the room was dark. The moon was rising in the east, giving enough light for her to find the coal oil lamp and light its wick. Holding the lamp close to the clock, she could see that it was a little before 8 o'clock, way past bedtime, and nighttime was on them. The men, maybe they were at the Fox Dan Webb place and unloading the wagon. Just then the clock struck 8 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. She thought, maybe Alan's on his way back. Maybe John's on his way home to Delhi and the children. Now what else do I need to get done around here? She was hoping she'd find the energy to scoot the last of their belongings close to the back door. That'd make things a little easier for Alan. Yes, she'd try to move all of the things. I'll help Alan all I can, she thought. Although she felt numb from tiredness, she strained every muscle in her body, hoping to have things in place. Finally, each and every belonging was there by the back door, ready to be moved from the house to the wagon. In the morning, she said, in the morning. In the morning, we'll load up this cook table, this water bucket, and this stuff here, and I'll pack up this coal oil lamp and this clock. I'll load up this bed stuff, and Alan'll take down our bedstead, and this bushel basket with our food, and these jars won't be carried out until after we've had a bite of breakfast. And in the morning I'll need to fill these jars with water, and the children or Alan just might get thirsty on the way up there. Glancing back to look at the children, Katy opened the back door, and leaving it ajar, she went to the cistern to draw a bucket of water. The brightness of the harvest moon lit the beaten path to the cistern. She could plainly see the barn, the hog lot, the hen house, the fence around the barn, and the cow lot, and there were her good clotheslines, and there were the cedars behind the outhouse. It's almost as light as day out here, she said aloud. She looked at those cedars once more. For the first time she was aware of how full they were, and how tall they'd grown. Well, she said to herself, there'll be another outhouse up on the Fox Dan Webb place, and there'll be more Christmas trees up there, too. As she lowered the bucket into the cistern, she said, now I hope I can flip this rope and tip this bucket without spilling that milk in the cooler. It sounds right down there for sure. I think I might have been able to flip that bucket on the first try. Well, thank the Lord. Before entering the back door, she turned around and looked once more at the place which had been their first home. She didn't tarry long, however, because the children were in the house alone. As she stepped into the doorway, carrying the full bucket of water, her words were, now, if we have a fire in the middle of the night, this water bucket won't be the first thing to catch on fire. She looked again to see that Kenneth Ray and Benny didn't have their heads covered up with the pillows. They were sleeping soundly. She reached down to touch Geraldine's feet, and she noticed the fragrance of the yellow soap. The clean smell of the children refreshed Katy. She noticed also a faint smell of coal oil coming from the burning wick, and was just glad it wasn't mixed with the smell of turpentine. Katy thought, I'll find some time when we get up there, and I'll cut Kenneth Ray's hair. His hair needs it worse than Benny's does. Benny's hair just kinks all up when it's wet. I've got to get Kenneth Ray's hair cut before he starts back to school. I need to cut their fingernails too. Now, let me see. I'll have to find my pair of scissors. I think they're in that box with all of those quilt pieces. I think. Yes, I remember putting them there. But I'm not going to cut their fingernails tonight. They're asleep, and I'm just too tired. With the sun no longer above the Gene Kuntz place, the September night air was beginning to cool down. Geraldine's feet had been cool when she'd touched them. Katy decided she needed to spread a thin sheet over all the children. "We'll have a fine night for sleeping," she said softly, "and you children may need a little more cover before morning, and maybe your daddy can get some sleep if the air is cool." As she bent down to cover their feet, she heard the buzzing, zzz, zzz, of a mosquito. "Oh, there's a confounded mosquito," she said softly. "These children won't get a minute's rest if I don't kill that thing." Quietly she walked to the cook table and found a brown paper sack. Katy rolled up many such pieces of old paper and old sacks, and she'd swatted many a fly that way. Now, she knew that mosquito'd have to land on something other than one of the children before she'd swat it. It'd be good if it just landed on her. With one slap, it'd be one dead mosquito. But instead of landing, that pesky little biter buzzed off to somewhere else and got quiet. And Katy was thinking, when I get over to the tunnel, I'm going to pick up one of those wire fly swatters and hang it on the nail or on the wall somewhere. Mommy says you can even buy something called fly paper. Finally, Katy could undress and put on her night clothes. She dipped the cold water from the bucket into the washpan. She found that yellow bar of soap. She washed up and slipped into a thin cotton dress. Again, she was thankful for the warm weather because she could clean up with cold water. Katy took great pride in being clean before going to bed. She was thinking that Alan would be pulling in with Old Beck and Kate at any minute, and the wagon would be empty. Trying to pass the time, she began singing softly, "Ask the Savior to help you, comfort, strengthen, and keep you. He is willing to aid you. He will carry you through." Her singing turned into praying. She thanked the Lord for all the ways He'd helped her. She asked forgiveness for any sin in her life. She petitioned the Lord to watch over the children through the night, to help Alan and John unload the wagon, and to just watch over the men. She asked Him to watch over the cattle raising project up there on the Foxtan Webb place. She reminded Him that they couldn't do this alone. Her final petition was for Him to help her to be a good wife and mother. Then her praying was interrupted. Zzz, zzz, silence. Zzz, zzz, more silence. Zzz, 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 slap. That mosquito lay lifeless. Yes, it'd been a big one while it was flying around, but there it was with its skin-piercing mouth, wispy wings, and long legs reduced to a bloody splatter on Katy's left forearm, and she was on her way to the washpan and that bar of yellow soap. At the back door, as she emptied the washpan, she thought, "I think I hear Alan." She listened without breathing. Breathing would have made too much noise. She heard nothing. Katy began humming the tune, "What a Friend We Have in Jesus." She stopped. She was sure she'd heard Alan down at the barn. She couldn't see Alan, even with the brightness of the moon, but she could hear him. He was whistling his one special song, "Love Lifted Me, Love Lifted Me." No words were being sung, but Katy knew the words. The sound of Alan's whistling continued, "Love lifted me." The unsung words spoke to Katy, helping her to feel less tired. She held her shoulders upright, believing again in the truth of the old hymn. How pleasant the sound was. It meant they were going to go forward. From Alan's lips came the beautiful whistling sound, and from Katy's lips came the words, "Lord, I thank you again for your blessings on us, and I ask you to help us." She remembered what Alan had so often said. You don't ever stay in one place. You either go forward or slip backward. She had confidence in what Alan said. She stepped out of the back door and walked down the path to meet him. "I'm glad you're home, Alan. I guess John went on home. There's some food ready if you're hungry. I've got cool water in the bucket. There's water in the tub where the children took their baths. I'm not really hungry, hon, just tired. I'm going to get a good drink of water and clean up a little for bed. I'm not going to worry around with putting up those hens in the coops tonight. We can do that tomorrow. Right now, I just want to go to bed." As he stepped into the house, he wanted to see the children first. Carrying the lamp, Katy walked with him into the bedroom. There, Kenneth Ray, Benny, and Geraldine were, sound asleep on the feather bed. He seemed shocked by the emptiness of the rooms. He noticed the amount of odds and ends sitting on the kitchen table and on the floor around it. "Katy, how'd you get all of this milking done and move all of this stuff?" "Hon, with the help of the good Lord, Alan." "I know that's the truth, Katy. I know for sure. Alan, I wish you'd eat a little something. What about some biscuits and milk?" As he cleaned up for bed, he was thinking how hard she worked to keep his family together and to understand his ways and help him. He thought of a verse of Scripture which said something about a wife like her. A sanctified woman will have a sanctified husband. He knew that Katy had a special helper, the Holy Spirit, and in his heart he gave thanks to the Lord for her, his perfect helpmate. "I'm too tired to eat," he thought, "but I'll eat in the morning." The end of the day had finally come. A most welcomed breeze blew across the room. Alan lay down to rest, and after looking at the children one last time, Katy blew out the coal oil lamp, wiped off her feet with a bare washcloth, and felt the comfort of the soft feather bed. Possibly Alan was reading her thoughts. He said, "Yes, Katy, hon, tomorrow night we'll all be sleeping in a different house." He yawned. His day was done. At that moment Katy remembered the box under the bed. She said to herself, "I ought to move that box right now. Tomorrow morning Alan'll be in a big hurry around here. I don't want to see anything happen to that box." Easily she let her feet touch the floor. With a slight sound she pulled the cardboard box from under the foot of the bed and slid it past the sleeping children. As quietly as possible, Katy moved the box to the opposite corner of the bedroom, and she said to herself, "I'll take care of that box myself first thing in the morning." In Katy's way of thinking, those things in that box were worth more than hundreds of cattle on the Foxden Webb place, and all of the money stacked up in any home in Christmas Tree Country or anywhere in the world. The room was dark, but something told her to open the box. That's what she did. There on top, in a pillow slip, was the family Bible. She knew it was the Bible because of the way it felt. Under the Bible was a heavy cloth, extending from side to side of the box and from the front to the back. She lifted one corner and ran her fingers under the heavy cloth. Katy knew her fingers were touching photographs, hard-to-come-by pictures of the children and kinfolk and other folks in Christmas Tree Country. No, there in the darkness, Katy couldn't see any of those black and white images, but in her mind she could plainly see them. Yes, that box held pictures that she and Alan had been blessed with over the years. Carefully, the Bible and the heavy cloth were put back in place. The box lid was closed. Now, Katy promised herself, tomorrow morning I'll set this box right up there by my feet in the wagon." Once more she thought of the children, sleeping there at the foot of the bedstead. "I'd say I ought to put another thin sheet over them. They might just get cool before morning. Yes, they might get cool. I might have to get up in the middle of the night and close that one window." Once more, with the damp wash rag, she wiped off her bare feet. She sighed as she lay down. Her day was done. Katy became quiet. She could hear Alan snoring. Her last thoughts of the day were, "Lord, thank you." Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. And Katy slept, and she dreamed.